My name is Lena. I'm sitting here, my laptop open, the cursor blinking on a blank page. I'm a writer, known for thrillers that keep readers up at night. But today, I'm not writing fiction. I'm writing about me, about where I come from. It's not a pretty story, but it's mine. My mom, Claire Valmont, was a big deal in the TV world. Beautiful, charming, the kind of woman who lit up a room. I remember watching her on TV, admiring how everyone seemed to love her. But that was just one side of her. When I was a kid, I never really understood why I had to live so differently. Born with a hair lip, I had surgery as a baby. But to Mom, I was a mistake, something to hide. "We can't let people see you like this," she'd say, her voice cold, as she adjusted the medical mask on my face. "You understand, right? It's for your own good." I grew up in a big house, but it felt like a prison. I was always alone, except for the nanny, Mrs. Jenkins. She was kind but scared of Mom. Everyone was. One day, I heard Mom talking on the phone. "Yes, she's always sick. Poor thing. It's a severe immune disease," she lied so effortlessly. I knew then that she was ashamed of me, that she saw me as a burden. My dad? He wasn't around much after the divorce. I heard he was living it up with his new family. I used to imagine him coming to rescue me, but he never did. I didn't go to school like other kids. A tutor came home to teach me. "Keep your mask on," she'd remind me, just like Mom. I turned 10 that year. I was sitting in my room, my only sanctuary, when Mom walked in. She looked at me, her expression hard to read. "Mom, if you hate me so much, why don't you just send me to Dad?" I asked. I needed to know, even if it hurt. She laughed, a harsh, cold sound. "And let the world think I abandoned my sick child? No, we can't have that. Better they think I'm a saint, caring for her ailing daughter." That night, I cried myself to sleep. I was just a prop in her perfect world, a secret she was desperate to keep. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be a secret forever. I often think about how different my life was from other kids. There I was, cooped up in my room, a mask covering half my face, while they were probably out playing, laughing, living. My world was small, confined to the walls of my room, my imagination the only place I could be free. Every morning started the same. I'd wake up to the muffled sounds of the house, slip on the mask that had become my unwanted companion, and sit down for breakfast. Mrs. Jenkins, our housekeeper and my nanny, would bring it in, her face always wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning, dear," she'd say, setting down my tray. "Your mother left early for a shoot. She said to remind you to keep your mask on." I nodded, used to the routine. It was always like this. Mom was either absent, busy with her glamorous life, or when she was home, I was just a problem she had to deal with. Some days, I'd try to talk to Mrs. Jenkins to get some glimpse of the outside world. "What's it like out there, Mrs. Jenkins? Are the flowers blooming?" She'd pause, a sigh escaping her. "Yes, the garden is lovely. I wish you could see it." But wishes were useless in my world. As I grew older, the isolation ate at me. I watched TV, saw other kids my age doing normal things, and it burned. I wanted that. I wanted to be normal. But Mom's voice would always echo in my head, "Normal? You'll never be normal." Sometimes, I'd rebel, in small ways. One day, I left my room, mask off, just to feel a moment of freedom. Mom caught me, her face twisting in anger. "What are you doing? Do you want the whole world to see you like this?" she yelled. Her words were like slaps, each one stinging more than the last. "I just wanted some air," I stammered. "Air? You have a window. Use it," she snapped, pushing me back into my room. "You're grounded. No TV for a week." That night, I lay in bed, feeling the weight of the world on me. I was her secret, her shame. She didn't see me as a daughter, just a mistake she had to hide. My only solace was my writing. I poured my heart into those pages, creating stories where I was brave, strong, loved. Writing was my voice when I had none. One evening, Mrs. Jenkins found me scribbling furiously. She watched me for a moment, then said softly, "You know, you're quite good at that." Maybe one day, you'll be a writer. I looked up, surprised. You think so? I know so, she said, a rare firmness in her voice. You've got talent, and more importantly, you've got something to say. That stuck with me, gave me a glimmer of hope in my dreary world. But hope was a dangerous thing. It made me want more, made me dream of a life where I wasn't just the girl behind the mask. I started to imagine what it would be like to leave this place, to find a world where I wasn't just a shadow. Sometimes life throws you a lifeline when you're drowning in despair. That's what happened to me one dreary Tuesday, a day that felt as gray as my thoughts. Everything changed with a phone call. The phone, an old relic, hardly ever rang, so when it did, it jolted me. Mrs. Jenkins answered, her face turning pale as she listened. Then she came to me, her voice barely a whisper. It's your father. My father, the man who had become more a figment of my imagination than a real person over the years, was on the line. I felt a mix of excitement and fear gripping me as I took the phone. Hey, Lena, his voice was unexpectedly warm. I saw your mother's show. She said you were dying. I closed my eyes, a wave of emotions washing over me. That show. I had watched it too, hidden away in my room. Mom, tears in her eyes, telling the world her daughter was on the brink of death. It was a performance worthy of an award. And it was all lies. I'm not dying, Dad. I'm right here, I said, my voice a mix of anger and relief. There was a pause on the other end, heavy with unspoken words. I'm sorry, for everything. I want to make things right. How about you come live with me? The offer was like a ray of sunlight in my dark world. Leave? Could I actually leave this house of lies and pretend love? Yes, I said quickly, without a second thought. I want to come. The days that followed were a whirlwind. My father came to get me, a man aged by time but still recognizable as the dad I remembered. Beside him was Linda, his new wife, her smile warm and inviting. We're here for you, she said, her words simple but sincere. It felt like a promise. Mom watched from the doorway as I left, her expression unreadable. She didn't say a word, didn't try to stop me. I looked back once, hoping for something, a sign of regret maybe, but she had already turned away, retreating back into her perfect, false world. Living with Dad and Linda was like breathing fresh air after being underwater for too long. For the first time in forever, I didn't have to wear the mask. I could just be myself, though I was still figuring out who that was. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, a concept still foreign to me, Linda asked, "What do you enjoy doing?" You know, for fun. I hesitated, unaccustomed to anyone taking an interest in me. I write, I said eventually. Stories. That's wonderful. Linda's eyes lit up. You should share them with us sometime. In that moment, a seed of hope was planted in my heart. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a place in this new world, a world where I was more than just a secret to be hidden away. Stepping into life with Dad and Linda was like walking into a different world, one where I felt like I belonged, like I was part of a real family, not a facade built on lies. One evening, Dad sat me down. There was a look in his eyes, a mix of concern and hope. We've been thinking, he began cautiously, about getting you the best care, to help you move forward. I instinctively tensed up at the mention of doctors. I'm tired of doctors, I replied, the words coming out sharper than I intended. He nodded, understanding my apprehension. It's not just about appearances. It's about healing, inside and out. We want you to be happy, truly happy. Linda added softly, you've been through so much. It's time you had a chance to heal completely. Their words sank in, and I agreed to it. We found a top-notch clinic, and the surgeon there, Dr. Avery, was different from any I'd encountered. He didn't just see a patient, he saw a person. The day before the surgery, he said to me, remember, this isn't about changing who you are. It's about helping you see yourself in a new light. The surgery was more successful than I could have hoped. For the first time, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't feel disgust. I saw a reflection that surprised me. I even bore a resemblance to my mother, her beauty that I never thought I could share. But it wasn't just about the physical change. The real journey was the therapy that followed with Dr. Klein. It was about untangling the web of emotions and scars inside me. In one session, I found myself breaking down. I'm just so angry, I confessed, tears streaming down my face. Angry at my mom, at the world, at myself. Dr. Klein handed me a tissue, her gaze steady. It's okay to feel angry. But remember, you also have the power to let go of that anger, in your own time. It was a long, tough climb, but slowly, I started to feel a shift inside me. The anger began to ebb away, replaced by something calmer, more like peace or perhaps acceptance. As the days passed, Linda noticed the change. You're smiling more, she remarked one evening, a note of happiness in her voice. I touched my face, almost in wonder. Yeah, I guess I am. It feels right. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like the author of my own story. Not defined by my past, my scars, or my mother's shadow, but by my own strength and resilience. I started writing thrillers under a pseudonym, pouring every ounce of my tumultuous past into them. As I healed and grew, so did my stories. They became more mature, more gripping. By the time I was 28, I was a successful author, my books flying off the shelves. But despite my success, I always kept my true identity a closely guarded secret. Then, out of nowhere, the past called me. Literally. I was at home, scribbling notes for my next book, when the phone rang. Dad answered and, after a brief conversation, his face clouded with confusion. It's for you, he said, handing me the phone. Something about a TV show. I took the phone, my heart skipping a beat. Hello? Hi, is this Lena Holmes? A chirpy voice asked. I'm calling from Straight Talk, hosted by Claire Valmont. We're huge fans of your work and would love to have you on the show. Claire Valmont. My mother. The words hit me like a wave, leaving me momentarily speechless. I'll think about it, I managed to stammer out. After hanging up, I turned to Dad and Linda, who were both looking at me with concern. It was Mom's show. They want me as a guest. Linda's eyes widened. Oh, my. Are you okay? I nodded, a plan slowly forming in my mind. I'm more than okay. I think it's time to face her. To show her, and everyone else, who I really am. Dad looked worried. Are you sure? That's a big step. I felt a surge of determination. I've never been more sure of anything. It's time she knew the truth. So, I called them back and agreed to go on the show. As the day approached, my nerves were a tangled mess, but underneath it all was a steady current of resolve. I was ready to take back my story. The day of the show, Linda hugged me tightly before I left. You're brave and strong, she said, her voice full of pride. Remember that, no matter what happens. The studio was a frenzy of activity, lights, and cameras everywhere. And there she was, Claire Valmont, as poised and charismatic as ever. She hadn't seen me yet. A producer approached me, all smiles. Ready to meet Claire? She's excited to have the mysterious author of The Wolf Trap on her show. I nodded, feeling an odd sense of calm. Yes, I'm ready. As I walked onto the set, my mother turned, her professional smile in place. Then her eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of uncertainty. Welcome, she said, recovering quickly. We're all eager to hear about your thrilling novels. Where do you find your inspiration? I looked into the camera, then back at her. Well, I began, my voice steady. Let's just say my childhood was quite eventful. The air was thick with unspoken words, the tension palpable. This was it. My moment of truth. Sitting across from my mother on live TV, my heart was pounding, but my voice was calm. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment to confront the ghost of my past. So, my mother started, her TV smile flawless. Your books have been a huge success. What's the secret to creating such spine-tingling stories? I leaned forward slightly, my hands folded. Truth is often stranger than fiction, I said, my voice even. My books, they're drawn from real experiences, real pain. Her smile faltered for a second. Real experiences? How intriguing. Can you give us an example? I took a deep breath. Well, let's start with a girl who was hidden away from the world because of her appearance. A girl who was told she was a burden, an embarrassment. The color drained from her face, her professional mask beginning to crack. I see. That's quite a dark inspiration. I didn't back down. Yes, it is. That girl was me, Claire. And you are the mother who hid her away. The studio was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. My mother's face was a picture of shock and disbelief. What are you saying? She stammered. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, I replied firmly. You're Claire Valmont, the woman who told the world her daughter was dying, just to gain sympathy. The woman who locked her daughter away because she couldn't bear the thought of having a child that wasn't perfect. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked around, as if seeking an escape. The producer tried to intervene. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No, I cut in, turning to the camera. There's no misunderstanding. For years, I lived in a shadow, hidden away, my very existence denied. But not anymore. I could see the panic in my mother's eyes now. She was losing control of the narrative, the perfect image she had crafted for herself. This is absurd, she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. You're making this up. Why would I do such things? Because to you, image was everything. And I didn't fit that image, I said, my voice steady but heavy with emotion. But I'm not that scared little girl anymore. I'm here to tell my story, the real story. The show cut to a break, the tension in the studio palpable. My mother was speechless, her facade shattered. For the first time, I felt like I was in control, no longer a victim of her lies and manipulation. The aftermath of the TV show was like a storm that had been brewing for years, finally breaking. The media went into a frenzy. My phone was ringing off the hook, journalists clamoring for more of my story. And through it all, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, no longer a burden I carried alone. The next day, Dad and Linda were glued to the TV, watching the news coverage. You've started quite the firestorm, Dad said, his voice a mix of concern and admiration. Linda nodded, her eyes on the screen. But you did what you needed to do. We're proud of you. I sat with them, watching as my mother's once flawless image was picked apart. There were debates, discussions, people expressing shock and sympathy. Then, the phone rang. It was the TV network. I answered, bracing myself. We've never seen a reaction like this, the voice on the other end said, a bit frantic. Your mother, she's been suspended. The show's on hold. I let out a slow breath. I see. After hanging up, I turned to Dad and Linda. They've suspended her. The show's on hold. Dad shook his head. I never thought it would come to this. I didn't either, I admitted. But maybe now she'll understand the impact of her actions. The days that followed were a whirlwind. My story was everywhere. People were talking, not just about the scandal, but about my books, my journey. I was invited to interviews, podcasts, book signings. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. One night, Linda sat down with me, a serious look on her face. Are you okay with all of this, Lena? It's a lot to handle. I thought about it. I am. It's like I've finally taken control of my own narrative. And maybe, just maybe, it'll help someone else out there who's going through their own struggle. As the dust settled, my mother's career took a hit. She became reclusive, shying away from the public eye. It wasn't my intention to ruin her, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Dad hugged me one evening, a bit of sadness in his eyes. You did what you had to do. And we're here for you, no matter what. Yeah, I said, feeling a sense of closure. It's time to move forward, to keep writing my story, but on my own terms. After the whirlwind of the confrontation and its fallout, life started to settle into a new kind of normal. I was busier than ever, with book signings and interviews, but there was a sense of peace within me that I had never felt before. I was no longer hiding, no longer a secret. One evening, I was sitting on the porch with Dad and Linda, the sun setting in a blaze of colors. Dad broke the silence. You know, Lena, I never imagined things turning out this way. But I'm glad they did. You've come so far. Linda nodded, taking my hand. You're an inspiration, not just to us, but to so many out there. I smiled, feeling a warm glow in my heart. Thanks. It feels good to finally be myself, to not be afraid of the truth. We talked about the future, about my next book. I was already working on it, pouring my newfound sense of self into the pages. It was more than just a thriller, it was a story of triumph, of overcoming the odds. The next day, I met with my editor, a no-nonsense woman who had always believed in me. Your story, it's powerful, she said, her eyes scanning the manuscript. It's going to resonate with a lot of people. I felt a surge of pride. I hope so. It's the most honest thing I've ever written. As the days passed, I found a new rhythm, a balance between my public persona and my personal life. I was still writing, still sharing my story, but I also took time for myself, for Dad and Linda, for the life we had built together. One afternoon, I sat down to write in my journal, a habit I had maintained since I was a child. It was a moment of reflection, of looking back and looking forward. I wrote about the journey, about the pain and the triumph, about the love and support I had found. I closed the journal, feeling a sense of contentment. My past was a part of me, but it didn't define me. I was more than the girl in the mask, more than the daughter of Claire Valmont. I was a writer, a survivor, a woman who had found her voice. As I looked out the window, I realized that this was just the beginning. There were more stories to tell, more chapters to write in my life. And I was ready for whatever came next.